raffling off 4 prizes. A beautiful package that Jenn Cipriano of Copia is donating, and we've got some other fall-themed items. I'm Janet Fonts. Nice to see everybody. I'm one of the program coordinators with Angela McTurner and Susan Foxworth. This fall event is one of my favorites. It's like, you know, it's the official kickoff of the fall season and the holidays, and it's the one time we can get together before we hibernate for the winter. So I love it, and it's a season of hot chocolate and pine cones and fir trees. It's my favorite time of the year. Before we introduce the speaker tonight, I want to thank our outstanding hospitality team. Again, you guys always knocking out the park. There's no one more committed to entertaining than Cindy Palmer, Robin Miner, and Ann Tropiano. They are the dream team. And then a shout out to Susan and again Ann for the gorgeous flower arrangements. And now let me introduce our speaker, who is not only a talented business owner, but she's a treasured community partner. Jenn Cipriano is the co-owner of Copia Home and Garden in South Salem, right across the border, for those who venture off out of New Canaan. She attended Cornell University, earning a BS in ornamental horticulture. She worked at Brooklyn Botanical Garden and the Denver Botanical Garden. She enjoys planting workshops in her area, and she's so committed to education. Fun fact, she and her husband Peter have recently started their own farm growing perennials, trees and shrubs, organic vegetables, and raising eggs. So Jenn will tell us all about that later. In addition to Jenn's horticultural talent, she and Peter are, again, our valued community partners, partnering with several New Canaan nonprofits for the preservation and beautification of our town. Copia works with Planet New Canaan, holding a native plant sale annually. I don't know if everyone knows about this, but this is pretty big news. For every $75 in native plants sold, they donate $10 worth of native plants at wholesale price to a New Canaan pollinator property. Copia has also been working with the New Canaan Pollinator Group on its spring program featuring landscape architect Louis Fisco, right? And as well as helping to design the Camp Hutchins Garden and Bristow Bird Sanctuary. Copia also generously works with the New Canaan Land Trust, donating trees or offering trees at cost, which is tremendous and extremely generous. Thank you, Jenn. Jenn is on the advisory board of both the New Canaan Beautification League and Planet New Canaan. Please welcome Jenn Cipriano.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and see so many familiar faces. So it calms my nerves a bit to see some familiar faces. And so thank you for joining us tonight. So we're going to talk about what to do with the garden now. And oh boy, what a reminder we got today, didn't we? Of what's to come. It got really cold, and it's going to get really cold tonight. We're going to probably have a freeze, so not to fret. I'll leave enough time at the end so you can run home and like grab a few last minute things you want to save. But it's winding down, and you know, things have to rest so that they can be even more beautiful next year too, right? So time to wind down. Boy, was it a long season, I tell you. I kind of look forward to the winter and so fast. But very quickly, Peter and I get bored. So by like January 15th, we're like, all right, what are we doing? So fall gardening. So I think after this talk, you're gonna get to realize that there's a lot less that you need to do now than maybe you were used to doing or feeling that you needed to do or having your landscaper do. And I think what we've tried to do is change that mindset of wanting to clean everything up. It's the end of the season. Of course, that like natural instinct is, okay, let's like clean everything up and get it ready for the winter, but that's the last thing you want to do. You really want to try to have a light hand to your garden, because all those plants that are now senescing and going to rest have the protective measures themselves to help them get through the winter. And if you take that away, then you have to tinker more in the spring, or you have a lot of winter injury. And if you just let everything naturally go to rest and do a few other things, you'll have a very successful garden for the spring. So I'll try to run through this pretty quick. First thing you want to do is do a walk through your yard. Take a little notepad and just walk through, and what are some of the things that you notice and see, and take notes if something doesn't seem quite right, or if you have a question, then you go inside or you get in the car, drive to Copia and ask Peter and I. But yeah, I mean, really, a lot of times just taking 15 to 30 minutes of walking around and looking to see what's going on. You'd be surprised how many things you didn't notice. And you're like, gee, I didn't realize that tree had a huge hanging branch, or like part of it seems to have lost its leaves and some part of it still has the leaves. Maybe something's going on. So take a walk through and take notes of things that you're noticing. And if you have questions, ask. But always, if you do any internet surfing, always go to an extension website. UConn, Cornell, a university extension website, particularly of the Northeast, is going to have sound advice on things to do, and to pests and things to do, to identify good information. And then of course your local library, which is amazing. So so let's start off with trees and shrubs, and this is the biggest question we always get this time of year. How do I prune, and how far do I go? Not at all, and not at all. So you really don't want to do any pruning in the fall. Let's talk about evergreens. So if you were to prune evergreens, now it's starting to get cold right now, so you're not in too much danger. If you were to do some pruning to your evergreens, you're not in too much danger of what I'm about to say. But if you, let's say, started doing some pruning of your evergreens about a month ago, we had a lot of warm weather that came through. What you're going to see is new growth sprout, especially something like boxwood. That's a quick grow. So any of the broadleaf evergreens that grow fairly fast, if they put on any new growth before the winter that doesn't harden off, that cuticle doesn't get nice and coated and hard, it's going to get winter injury. So you prune a boxwood in September, get soft growth, and all of a sudden come March you see a toasted cast to the outside of the boxwood. And so that's what's happening. You don't want to prune your evergreens. In the pruning, in terms of the deciduous like trees and shrubs, you could do some corrective pruning of trees. If you see a limb that's dead or something that's broken, of course go ahead and prune that away, especially if it's a hazard, something too big to handle. You always call an arborist. But it's very easy to take a look at these types of things, like shrubs that look like this in the garden, and want to say, we don't want to do that. Trees and shrubs have a lot of energy stored in these stems, and all that energy and those sugars are going down into the ground right now and being stored in the root system. So, and also trees and shrubs put out roots in the fall, and that's why they say fall is for planting. So plenty of time to do your planting still, especially of deciduous trees and shrubs. Evergreens, we try to steer clear. The broadleaf evergreens, especially like hollies and rhododendron, We try to end that around the middle of November. We get too late into the fall and into winter with those, and they don't have enough roots to kind of gain moisture before the winter. They have broad leaves and they're transpiring and losing moisture all winter. So they have much more likelihood of winter injury if planted in the fall or too late in the fall, so we avoid those. But deciduous trees and shrubs do fine. If you do planting of perennial trees and shrubs in the fall, you do want to do some light mulching, because if the ground does freeze quickly, they could heave. So as the ground freezes and those plants don't quite have a lot of roots yet, they could just start lifting up out of the ground, especially the perennials. And so if you do your fall planting, you want to do some light mulching around to make sure that lessens the risk of the heaving. But back to pruning. So you're really gonna stay away from not pruning this. This is a potentilla. I know it looks very rangy right now, but it's a beautiful hardy shrub. It gets tons of flowers in the summer. They come in all different colors. And if you really had to like go and shape it or something, you know, it's the rules of a third. So you can kind of go around and nip off some of these like sort of wispy ends if you wanted to. You don't have to. But what all of this foliage does is protects the crown of the plant too, down here. So all of this, instead of like whacking everything down and throwing tons of mulch into your beds, here's your mulch. This is protecting the crown of this plant. And when it snows, the snow isn't laying right at the center of the plant where it might rot it out. So it has this beautiful little canopy, and it's protecting the plant for the winter. Same with this hydrangea. Big question we get. Through my hydrangea. You don't. Prune to shape. Again, rule of the third, never more than a third. This one, as you can see, is kind of like wonky, but let's say, you know, in March when it is time to prune this. Oh, by the way, so this is a panicle hydrangea, right? So this is one of the types of hydrangea that bloom on new growth. So bloom on new growth hydrangea can be pruned pretty much at any point before the end of April. And a lot of people don't want to see the brown, you know, by the end of the winter, you're like, I'm tired of looking at those brown, you know, flowers. So no more than a third. If you whack these down to the ground, you're going to get a floppy hydrangea. Same with the Annabelle. Annabelle is also a type that blooms on new growth. So you don't want to whack them down, you just want to tip them and kind of shape them up so it's a more even shape. And then you would take off these flower buds. Now, if you want to take off the flower buds and do arranging now and make beautiful wreaths, of course you can do that. That's not going to affect the shrub at all. You just don't want to go whacking it down. And, you know, these are kind of uneven. It's kind of taller in the back and shorter in the front. So I'm just going to like, by the way, something that I learned not that long ago. Florists always learn to cut on an angle, right? When you prune straight across. You don't prune on an angle. And let me tell you, I still prune on an angle. I can't get out of the habit. Because if you do a lot of floral work, that's what you're supposed to do. But yeah, so you just lightly shape this up, and that's it. But I wouldn't do that really until end of February, March. There's a famous saying by Pete Udolph, the designer. He designed the High Line. Brown is a color too. Okay, so those brown flower heads are just as beautiful. Another note for trees and shrubs, for our broadleaf evergreens. Thanksgiving, mark it in your calendar. You use either wilt proof or This is by Bobex. There's also other brands too. This is deer repellent with wilt proof in it. And we call it an anti-desiccant. What that does is it coats the leaf and prevents the moisture from leaving the leaf. So hollies, rhododendrons, if you've noticed through the winter, especially last winter, we had a drought, and so you saw a lot of severe winter injury. You would see less if you had done the wilt proof. Not so much arborvitae or like conifers, but more the broadleaf evergreens, ilex in particular. We have a lot of people planting ilex now, trying to get away from planting so much boxwood. It's fantastic, but they tend to be very prone to winter injury, so I would wilt proof ilex for sure. So anything broadleaf. And another thing that kind of rears its ugly head in the winter with trees and shrubs are the critters. So rabbits, mice, rats. Yes, we have rats in the woods. They're everywhere, I know, yes. So they love tender, juicy, sweet bark of plants, in particular fruit trees, but not just fruit trees. We just brought in some big, beautiful lilacs last week. And we went out one morning and one of my staff was like, look at all the trunks of the lilacs. They all had been nibbled at. Oh. So we're out there with the repellent. And now we've got little cages around all those trunks. But that's, they get hungry and you never know when it's gonna happen. Sometimes it happens right now, like right before the winter, they're like scavenging. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the winter. Deer are very guilty of doing this too. They'll eat at the bark of apple trees especially. They rub their antlers on things. So what you want to do is just buy some wire mesh, not chicken wire, but the wire mesh that's like 1/4 inch openings, and just form like little cages around those trunks, and usually come up about 18 inches and all the way down to the ground, and that should protect those tender trees that maybe you just planted, but in particular, God bless you, the fruit trees especially. And again, it's that scouting thing. Take a look every once in a while and see what's happening. If you see this like gnawing or nibbling at the base of some of the shrubs or your trees, you can nip it in the bud. If it goes too far, it'll girdle the tree and you will lose the tree. So we lost a whole bunch of apples 2 winters ago from severe mole and vole damage. So it was a little catch-22, like we wanted to do everything natural and we were not mowing. We didn't do like a final mow of in between the rows of the apples. And we just had it was perfect environment for little scurrying things to run around. And then when it's cold, they love nibbling on all that bark. So that also leads me to talk about mulch. Stop buying mulch. You've got tons of mulch falling from the trees now, so use your leaves. If you've got lots of leaves in the lawn, run them over with the mower and use that leaf mulch in your beds. If you don't want to mulch it up and just want to blow it into the beds, that's fine too. Too deep is not great around larger shrubs, but for the winter, it's not so bad. You just have to make sure that everything kind of gets raked away from the trunks. But leaf mulch is so fantastic. It's so good for your soil as it breaks down. It feeds the microbes, and really it's what God is giving us to use. So, but it helps protect things. When you do your walkthrough in your property, if you see exposed soil, that's not a great situation. Roots could be exposed. You get more winter injury. you want the plants to fill in. That's why we don't want to whack everything down and clean everything up. And then all of a sudden you see all these little stumps of all your plants and then bare soil. That's not the scenario you want. That exposes everything more to the elements, and you're robbing and stealing important things away from the garden. It's also an environment for your beneficial insects to be harbored in. So all of this foliage that stays, and then the leaves that you blow into your beds, there's a lot of beneficial insects that love that environment. Only time I would say to clean things up is disease prone types of plants, which actually segues me into the perennials. So what to do with the perennial beds? Well, again, don't touch. Try not to. Things get floppy and messy, I understand, but all this beautiful foliage will protect the crowns of the plants. This aster, and you can see all of that basal foliage down there, right? Now if you whack all this down, that exposes the crown of the plant, and we get a nice snowfall, and as the snow melts, it just rots that right out. So let the foliage protect the plant. Mulch, but again, if you mulch everything over after you've cut everything back, you have all of that moisture sitting on the crowns of the plants, and it's not a great scenario. Certainly blow leaves into the areas so that you don't have any exposed ground. It helps protect the root systems. So, but really you just want to leave all of this. And with a lot of these plants, some beautiful seed comes from these plants, and if you want them to spread and fill an area, that's what's going to help these plants, naturalize an area. If it's a neater, tighter perennial border that you want to kind of stay in control, go ahead and nip off all of the dead seed heads. Sometimes you might say, well, I keep ripping out all these echinacea. I can't take any more echinacea. So you go in and you just nip off all those little flower heads. I don't know how to do it, but and this is a rudbeckia, but they're so pretty to look at all winter long. And the birds and the goldfinches, they love them. But certainly, if you see some of these plants getting a little too thuggish, go ahead and nip off all those seed heads, give them to your friends, or, toss them in the compost, or toss them somewhere else, or bring them to the nature center for them to use in their natural areas. But, it's really good to leave them. Now grasses, they are putting on such a show. Even this switchgrass, which is now obviously turned brown. But look how architectural and beautiful that is. So these are all the little seed heads that will help it to spread. This is a little blue stem, the birds. And there's nothing like passing by a perennial border in the winter, and you'll see a flutter of all these little birds scurrying out from in between all of these plants. It's their protection. It's where they live for the winter, and they're going to take care of and eat all of those insects come spring that you hate. So they're really you're really encouraging the environment by just letting things naturally go. And then come March, 1st of March, end of February sometimes if you really got to get out there and you're anxious. But March usually is a good time to go out there and then whack everything down. Yeah, so that's the perennial scenario. Let's see. Oh yes, how could I forget? Bulbs. It's bulb planting season. So any of those little pockets that you see in your perennial borders or your beds, now's the time to plant bulbs. So, and all of the packages have information on how deep to plant them and where to plant them and when they bloom. So lots and lots of bulbs available now. Great time to plant them now. Now it's cooled off. A lot of people get anxious and they want to plant them in September. It's still too warm, and sometimes they'll like actually sprout, and you don't want that to happen. But now that it's cooled down, now's a great time to start. We plant bulbs well into December, so plenty of time. And definitely go ahead and throw some bulb tone down on those bulbs, because what happens in the fall, plants put out roots, and so that bulb tone has ingredients in it that's gonna encourage those roots to grow. I forgot when I was talking about the trees and shrubs. Not so much perennials. I don't feed the perennial beds in the fall, but trees and shrubs, you can do a late, I emphasize late, feeding of the trees and shrubs, holly tone for evergreens, plant tone for everything else, and boxwood. You don't want to use holly tone on boxwood. Boxwood like a high pH. They don't like acidic soil, they like a higher pH, so you want to use plant tone and lime. And the reason why we say it's okay to fertilize late fall is, and it should be an espoma, plant tone, holly tone product, or other organic fertilizer, because it takes time to work itself into the soil, and it's really encouraging the soil microbe activity, even in the cold. So you may not have the plant taking up the nitrogen and the phosphorus and the potassium that's in it, but you're feeding the soil biome, and it's there when they need it, when they wake up in the spring. And sometimes we don't get around to fertilizing until April or May. But if you do it in late fall, that food's there for them when they're ready to wake up. If they're starving of something or another, it's there. And it just sits there. The synthetic fertilizers don't do it. They're made to dissipate and go through the soil and be gone. Organics stay. So that's a good thing to do. Compost and biochar, this is something fairly new that you might be hearing about. Biochar, and then they add compost to it. Basically, all you're doing with this is feeding the soil biome. Don't understand 100% how it works yet. There's some understanding of it, but if you have some struggling trees and shrubs, or even your perennial beds, you see, things just haven't looked that great the past few years, go ahead and spread some compost and biochar. Get that soil microbe activity going, and you'll see a big difference come the spring. So that kind of touches on the fertilizing. We talked about bulbs. And if you, as many people have done, started cutting gardens, it's time to dig up those dahlias. Tonight those dahlias are you're gonna run out there with your headlamp and cut the last few dahlias, because I think they might be gone tonight. But it's okay. It's okay to leave the let things freeze and let those dahlias die back. So you're gonna run out there this week or this weekend, start digging up those tubers, you lay them out, clean them up really good, let them dry off and lay them out a bit. And I like to store them in either, we sell what's called Eco Flake, it's wood shavings for chicken coops. Works great with dahlia tubers. In a crate or a cardboard box with something that kind of breathes, nothing like not like a Rubbermaid container or something like that. You want it to kind of breathe. You don't want the bulbs or the tubers to dry out, but you don't want them to store too much moisture. Or we have, a lot of people prefer vermiculite. We have big bags of vermiculite. That works great too, because it holds just enough moisture but not too much. So time to dig up those dahlias and yes.
If you plant dahlias in a pot,
Mm-hmm.
can you bring in there and grow in the winter?
Yes, and I have done that successfully, and I'll tell you why. Because if more than likely they're planted in the pot in potting mix. And potting mix is peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite. Peat moss is another substrate that we store tubers into that works pretty good. You have to be careful, it could hold too much moisture, but it works pretty good. So all you're doing is you've got the tuber already stored in a sense, but you just have to be careful that it stays on the dry side. You don't want to water that pot or anything, just put it where it's not going to freeze in the basement of the garage and let it kind of just sit there. And most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, you bring that pot out in the spring, water and fertilize, and it starts to resprout.
But it doesn't give you any flower in the winter pot.
No, oh, you mean you could hold it over as a house plant, but I think they deserve and need the rest. So it's better to let them rest, and then they'll be even better next year. So there was a question in the back, maybe.
You might have answered it. I was just gonna say, my dahlias and my plants will make it late as soon as possible, but they're just flowering now and they've got lots of buds. But I think I'm hoping is that that's stopped off with them from the summer.
Yeah, what you could do, I mean, I think it's gonna get too cold tonight to cover them or protect them. Go out there and cut a whole bunch and just keep them in vases. And the buds should, you know, some of the buds will probably open. Give them a nice warm spot. But yeah, they're getting ready. Okay, so on to vegetable gardens.
And I have one question.
Yeah, oh,
I've got
come
some
on.
How do you do? I've got some bananas that I know what to do. Banana plants,
Ah,
they're fabulous.
yes.
Someone told me, cut them down, make a cage, fill it with leaves. What do you think?
We're not on Long Island.
This is a local landscaper, not the ones not Chris. But,
I know Chris wouldn't say that.
yeah.
Okay, I would not believe someone if they said they did that around here and
Right.
were successful. However, I would argue it was probably in a very protected microclimate,
Yeah.
in
I
a
agree.
protected spot, like against the house, very protected, southern exposure, you know. On Long Island, we were able to do that with bananas and cannas,
Yeah,
passion vine, anything that's like a zone 7 plant.
right.
We were able to do that. And actually the bananas, if we whack them down, a lot of times like the moisture would get in them and rot them out. It would be better to wrap it,
Okay.
and you're gonna look like one of those Italian backyards. You're gonna like wrap the banana and put the pot on top. And that's what I would do, and mulch it.
Okay, if I may do an experiment.
Yeah, I would.
All right.
Piles of leaves, but piles of leaves often harbors things that'll eat
Yeah.
away. So what you could do is bag the leaves and then use that as insulation. It's gonna look kind of ugly, but yeah, so yeah, try it for sure. But bananas actually make beautiful houseplants. So if you have a beautiful banana that you've enjoyed on your patio, they really make a decent houseplant. They're not hard to keep in the house. Yeah, so, or pot it up, whack it down, and put it in your basement where it's not gonna freeze and just forget about it. And believe it or not, it'll probably resprout when you bring it out in the spring. They resprout pretty easily, just like cannas do. Some of the other tropicals, not so much mandevilla. Everyone always asks me, should I overwinter my mandevilla?
Yeah.
It gets so buggy, and like in hibiscus too. I know, I love hibiscus. It takes a lot of effort to like debug it though. So, but you could try. Some of the flowers, are, the colors are so worth saving. So, vegetable gardens. They had a decent year with our vegetables. It was a little rainy, a little wet. So that's one of the plants. Oh, and I forgot to mention in the perennial segue, the things that you want to clean up and remove foliage from are buggy things like hostas. Slugs love hostas, and they are just going to overwinter in all that yummy dead foliage. And so you want to clean up around the hostas pretty good. They don't need so much protection in the winter. They don't even need mulching. They sprout right up. They're really hardy. So you want to clean those up really good. You want to clean up around your roses really good. So many insects and diseases in foliage of roses that you want to get rid of that as much as you can. Light mulching around the roses, but you want to make sure to remove that come March, and don't touch those roses. Do not prune them. Not till March. But yeah, and then with the vegetables, you want to really remove all of your dead vegetable plant material. It will, most of that stuff like tomatoes, especially the solanaceous stuff like tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, there's so many diseases on those plants that will not die over the winter. And so you really want to remove that stuff, chop it up really good and put it in your compost pile, but like deep in your compost pile where it will heat up, and don't use that compost. If you have a compost area that you can throw this material into, I would say make sure you don't use it for like a year. Otherwise, just toss it into like the woods or something, chop it up and toss it in the woods. But you want to remove that from the garden. And we like to dust with sulfur. We find that the sulfur will suppress diseases really well as a preventative. Most fungicides, especially organic fungicides, are not corrective. They're preventative. So dusting with a sulfur dust, especially if you had some like leaf spot on your tomatoes or late blight or something like that, really helps in the vegetable garden. It's a great time to do a soil pH. Yep.
I have a question. I read somewhere. Peppers are perennials.
Peppers are perennial?
Yes.
I wish. I harvested all my peppers yesterday. I wish I had known that. No. No. They maybe reseed some of them. There's like a lot of grape tomatoes will reseed themselves.
I know.
Yeah, maybe get some peppers reseeding, but no.
Take them off and see if they last.
Oh, dig up and bring them in?
Yes.
Oh, that's different. So yeah, I do know quite a few people that are just, they love that pepper that they grew, and they dig it up and they pot it and they bring it in, and it does last a long time in the winter, I have to say, and will continue to produce. Their peppers are self-pollinating, so it'll continue to produce peppers. So yeah, sure, if you really love the pepper, yeah, try it. Why not? And they're pretty. They make a pretty good houseplant. I think because in our house it gets very hot and dry, and they love hot and dry. They love dry heat. It's like the one houseplant you'll have that loves it. So yeah, definitely do it. We like to use cover crop. Some people don't like cover crop because it gets kind of wily and crazy, but cover crop seeds come in these little packets. I show these packets to people and they're like, there's no way that'll do my whole garden. And then I'm like, well, this covers 1,200 square feet. And then they're like, oh, okay, sure, no problem.
Is it too late to do a couple?
No.
Does that?
Yeah, there's still some time, and you'll see it come up. I think you have a couple more weeks.
Okay.
But I would do the clover.
Clover?
And white clover would be even quicker.
Okay.
And white clover is a little more manageable. This is peas and oats, buckwheat, and crimson clover. So what you're doing with a cover crop is it starts to grow and it takes in all like tons of nitrogen, just fixes nitrogen like crazy. And then it holds it there in its leaves, and it stays pretty green all winter. And then come spring, when few weeks before you want to plant, you want to turn it over, and then it puts all that good stuff back in the soil.
How about potash or fire or ashes?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. People over the course of the winter will sprinkle their ashes. You have to be careful with wood ash. It could throw your soil really out of whack really fast. So lightly, maybe a few buckets worth, but nothing more than that. And definitely if you do that in the winter, I would do a soil test in the spring just to make sure nothing's too out of whack. Sometimes when you start doing a lot of the tinkering, you'll hear a lot of people talk about use this and, use potash, use feather meal, use alfalfa meal. All of a sudden you have too high of a nitrogen or too low of something else, and it's like it's really, the mineral thing is a really delicate balance, and it's better to just do things that feed the soil biome and then get a really good organic fertilizer that's balanced, and whatever the plants need, they'll grab it. So I love fish emulsion or like fish and seaweed like every 2 weeks with the vegetables, but certainly it's easier to throw some garden tone or tomato tone with extra calcium when you plant, and then once a month, because you just spread it and it's there. You don't have to mix it in water, and it doesn't the lobster. But certainly, yeah, that stuff's great. But certainly put down some compost now. If you feel like you're so rushed and have so much to do in the spring all the time, put your compost down now. So get the bed cleaned up, lay out your compost, and then do a quick little soil test in the spring and see where you're at, especially with pH. Yes?
Also, if you have, in the springtime, the peonies get mildew, and I noticed some of my clematis, not all.
Yeah.
But is there something you put down now to retard the mildew coming up in
The sulfur. The sulfur
That's
dust.
the sulfur.
Mhm.
Sulfur
Yeah.
dust, okay.
Definitely. And around the roses too. Okay. There are some things you can plant now in the vegetable garden now. Garlic. It's my favorite thing to plant around here. I tell everybody starting out vegetable gardening, plant garlic. Start with garlic. It's the easiest thing to grow. So now's the time to plant garlic. You could plant it in the spring too, but fall garlic is much better. You break out the individual cloves. You plant each one about 5-6 inches apart. You could do staggered, you could do a straight row, and each one of these cloves will develop a big, beautiful bulb of garlic. You do want to mulch it with like chopped straw after you've done your planting. And then come spring, start fertilizing every 2 weeks with like a good fish sea kelp emulsion that makes the garlic grow like crazy. When they start to grow, you'll see them get really kind of leafy, and then all of a sudden they develop this cute little curly cube called the scape. And those are delicious, but you want to make sure you harvest them, because if you let them go, it's the flower and it develops a seed head, and it starves the bulb of lots and lots of energy. So if you don't harvest the scapes, the bulb will be very wimpy. You want to harvest the scapes, use them, make pesto, they're amazing. And then you get a nice big garlic bulb around July, sometimes August. So, and you'll know it's time to like harvest them when the foliage starts to turn yellow and like yucky looking, and it's just, it's time to pull them up. And you could always go out and test and pull a few, and if they're not quite too big yet, you can wait a little bit longer, but usually around July, August. that goes with that. Let's segue into the oh, I didn't talk about these cuties. Another little thing you can add to the veggie raised beds. This is our saffron crocus. And you can see it's sprouting already. That's because it blooms in the fall. So around the border of the vegetable garden or in a little spot where you can remember where those little bulbs are tucked away, this is like the easiest thing. You literally stick your finger in the ground and like push it in and like cover it up. They will bloom in probably another week or two. Not to fret because it's supposed to. They bloom in the fall, not in the spring. And you harvest the little saffron threads. You can also use the whole flower in tea. It's supposed to be really good for you. And you have your own saffron, and they'll come back year after year after year. So they're really sweet little bulb. Let's move indoors really quick. Okay, so what to do indoors? You're just gonna start. You're gonna run home and you're gonna like scramble and get all your like tropical plants inside tonight. If you haven't already, tropical plants, house plants tend to be very buggy, especially when they come from like the cool weather outside, and now they're in like they're basically moving to Florida now. So all of a sudden the bugs are like woohoo! And you don't see them because they've laid their eggs in and among the foliage or in the soil. So, only time that I recommend using this product, otherwise I hate this product, but when you're trying to clean up your houseplants, this works great because it's systemic insecticide and you sprinkle it around the soil, you water it in, there's no pollinators in your house. And most of the tropical plants aren't going to be blooming in the house, maybe some hibiscus or whatever, but there's no worry. The only thing you don't want to use it on is an edible like citrus because it does go through into the plant and protects the plant from the bugs that way. So, but it's really great for cleaning up your house plants that you're moving in. It takes like a good 2 weeks to work though. So what you want to do is apply this, and then you spray your house plants down with this. You know, it's easier to do it when they're outside, but, you know, bring it into the garage or something, because you really want to spray this until you see it dripping, and really get into the cracks and the crevices, like lift it up, spray, and you want to see it dripping. This is called Endol. It is an insecticidal soap and neem oil, and we use it a lot. It works really well. It works in a lot of different ways. It smothers soft body insects, but it also smothers eggs. So go ahead and spray the soil too, because it'll kill the eggs of a lot of nuisance.
What about orchids? Is it safe to use to orchids?
No,
Or use it on?
you can't use anything on orchids. You have to swab with the alcohol and a Q-tip. Yeah, especially for mealybug. Yeah, the orchid foliage is really sensitive. I should say that. Thank you for reminding me. Hibiscus, jasmine, and I would say the mandevilla. You don't want to use the neem oil on. You'll see it'll scorch the leaf. Citrus. So this is a cocktail citrus because it's grafted with a lemon and a lime. And if you start to see this like yellowing going on, not to fret, it's probably needing some nutrient. So my favorite is something organic like this one. You shake it up and dissolve it in water, and it's 100% organic. And you're gonna feed your house plants once a month because they have no way of getting nutrient because they're in these containers, so you want to keep adding nutrient every once in a while. And as you can see, it's blossoming and starting to fruit. These are self-pollinating, so they don't need a pollinator. They're really nice to have, citrus in the house, because what happens is they've gotten these cool nights. If you've had them out on the patio, it's warm days and cool nights that makes them flower. It's actually that temperature fluctuation that all of a sudden you'll see on your citrus. They're like full of buds and blooms. So now you bring them into the house, they smell amazing, and they're gonna give you fruit. And then come April, you stick them out on the patio again, and the whole cycle starts again. So, citrus are a lot of fun. Oh, it's time to force bulbs. The beautiful Dutch amaryllis, they're starting already. Get them potted up now so you can enjoy them for Christmas, hopefully. The Dutch ones take a lot longer, but they just put on such an amazing show. Pot them up, soil level up there, water them once, put them in a really warm spot. And it's not so much a sunny spot on top that gets them to push. It's the bottom heat, it's the soil temperature that really has to be nice and warm. So I like to put mine like right by like a heat register or something. I put sometimes a whole bunch of them in like the boiler room. So even though it's dark in there, I give them like 2 weeks of in that boiler room are really, 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 really hot, and then I bring them out into the sunlight in a warm spot and they just go crazy. So, or they start to sprout. We have heat mats at the nursery. So we have these big heat mats that plug in, and the pots sit on top of them. They're like waterproof, and so the bottom heat is getting them going. Or you can make a bulb lasagna. So, and it's really easy to do. Take any old pot you have empty laying around. I mean, this one is just a fiber pot that you could, plant into a container once you force, or throw it in the compost or whatever. But something kind of deep so you can get the different layers. And so your bottom layer, you just add a little soil to the bottom. Fun little project to do with kids too. Little soil on the bottom. Start with a late blooming bulb. So these tulips would be perfect. I have these beautiful Menton tulips. So they get laid out evenly in the bottom. Little more soil. And then you do a mid-season bulb like these daffodils. Little more soil. No cheese. And then these cute little chandaxas, or you could do crocus, or you could do grape hyacinth, but these are so adorable. Beautiful blue flowers, cute little grassy foliage. Those go on top of that. Little more soil, water, and the best place to put it, you could put it in a garage if your garage gets cold enough, but they really need like 38 to 42. So, and they need 8 weeks of that. 6 to 8 weeks, but 8 weeks is the best. And cold is what makes bulbs bloom in the spring. That's why we plant them now. They need the winter to get them to bloom in the spring. So this is going to need to go through a chilling period, about 8 weeks. Bilko door. If you have those basement Bilko doors right on that top or second step, cold but protected, is not going to get tons of snow or rot out, Sometimes we put them like outside, on the back patio or something, and pile up leaves, but then I found like mice get in them or something. So Bilko doors right on that basement step. It's perfect. So do some bulb lasagnas. And then after about 8 weeks, you doldrums of winter, you're like, oh, I wish I had something. Oh, wait, I did that bulb lasagna. Let me pull it out of the freezer. And you put it inside in the warmth of the house. You first get that chandaxa or that early one, and then right behind it come the daffodils, and then right behind that come the tulips, and it's a lot of fun. I'm sorry if I'm running late. How am I doing on time? I'm almost there. House plants, containers. Who wants to look at empty containers all winter? Well, but if you do have some sensitive, fragile containers, this is the time where you do want to bring them in, or at least empty them out halfway and then protect them, because the freeze and thaw that we get over the winter really can wreak havoc on some more delicate planters. But the ones that you have left out, like your cast stone planters or your fiberglass planters, they can stay out, and we can fill them with beautiful, wonderful things for the winter. And just like these evergreens. And I have to say, in our area, these things do pretty well all winter long. I would in a container for the winter, but a lot of these things are pretty tough and hardy, and they seem to do just fine, arranged beautifully in a container. And then come spring, you want to get your flowers in the planters. What am I going to do? Oh, wait a second, it's not a cut green that I'm just going to toss out in the compost or something. This is a beautiful plant I can put in my yard. So we have this beautiful eastern red cedar or Hollywood juniper. No, sorry, this isn't eastern red cedar. This is Hollywood juniper. Similar to eastern red cedar, but gets the beautiful juniper berries, makes a great screening plant. This cute variegated Andromeda or Pieris, this wonderful Swiss pine. That could be a big, beautiful screening tree eventually. I just love this. This is arborvitae fern. Now this is a zone 7 fern. Has this wonderful like fragrance to the foliage. So this would be an experiment in the garden, I would say. But it'll look great most of the winter in your container. And so I just love the drapiness of the foliage. But there's also lots of other ferns too. There's Christmas fern. Christmas fern stays green all winter, looks amazing, and hence the name. And it's a native, so it's just wonderful. It's great. These cute little winter berries are Gaultheria. Sometimes a little confusing. Winterberry is also shared common name with Ilex verticillata, but cute little woodland, semi-evergreen spreader. So this could make a nice little ground cover eventually. It's a little tricky to get going. If anyone's ever tried it here, I'm sure they're gonna tell me no. But it likes shade. It does like shade, and it does like a kind of like humusy soil. So you have a good little woodland spot for it to get going. But I mean, look at those berries. This is the white one. This is what's the name of this one? Winter Fiesta. It goes from white and it turns like a pinkish color, which is really pretty. But then there's also the traditional red ones. And these look fantastic in your planters like all winter long. So the tricky part is getting them to grow in the garden. But it does happen. I have seen it. These cute little heathers are starting to pop up now. They love the cold. They bloom in the cold. Great to add to a rock garden or a nice sunny spot afterwards. Anybody know what this is? Want to take a guess? Anybody?
Rosemary?
Looks like rosemary. The common name is bog rosemary. It's an Andromeda. Yeah. So it's an evergreen. It looks like a rosemary. It's a low spreading shrub. Gets a cute little flower. It's a beautiful bluish silver foliage, but it likes like wet feet. So very acid loving in like a boggy area. So if you plant it in the garden, it's kind of specific about what it likes. But of course, you know, arranging something like that in a pot is something that you get to enjoy all winter long, well into March and April. So, last but not least, check your tools, do a little inventory. What am I missing? Where did those pruners go? Let me dig in the mulch pile. Yeah, do a little tool inventory and clean your tools. Clean them now. They're ready to go in the spring. That's, you know, we try to get our guys to do that, you know, right at the end and clean everything up so it's just ready to go. And also you want to clean them because you don't want them sitting around with all that gunky stuff on them all winter long. It actually makes your tools last a lot longer if you clean them up before the winter. Oil everything up, sharpen the edges of your like transplanting spades, sharpen those pruners, bring them to the hardware store. A lot of times they have people that come and sharpen things and get them nice and sharp. Nothing's worse than a dull pruner.
What do you
And
like
get
to clean them with?
WD-40. I use WD-40, and so and to like disinfect, we either use 50-50 bleach water, or sometimes I'll just use like I think all of us got like tons of hand sanitizer after COVID. So like hand sanitizer, just alcohol. So like squirt, 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 rub, 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 disinfected. But it's I also have like one of those little block sanders, those gray sanders, that cleans them up really good too. You kind of just like, it'll like get all the gunky caked on stuff and maybe a little rust, hopefully not, but cleaned off. And then I have one of the guys sharpen them because I just can't do it right. No one sharpens them like the guys do. Sorry, I'm like, I can't do this. Here, guys, sharpen my pruners. That's it. My favorite part of the talk is Q&A. So bring it on. Yes.
Ask you about the crocus, the saffron plant
Yes.
that you mentioned.
Yes.
Do you sell them?
Yes, we do. They come in this, usually displayed just like this in our bulb section, right next to the regular crocus, the spring crocus. And as you can see, they're starting to sprout and they're getting tangled in there. So probably this weekend, I'm going to take them out of this box. And if you don't run to get them, I'm just going to pot them. So I like to put them in these like shallow little terracotta pots, and like cutest thing to like put on your kitchen counter and watch bloom for a while. And certainly you can harvest the saffron, and then after they're done, you'll see all this like strappy foliage, and then go out in the garden, dig them in, and they'll come back next year. So no need to.
Do you teach us how to harvest it?
Oh, sure, but it's so easy. This is a good blow up version. The flower's not tiny. It's about that big, by about
Like crocus.
like a regular crocus. And you see these threads, that's the saffron thread, right? So they're pretty long. I mean, they're like a bright orange, just like that photo, and you just pluck them and you stick them in a jar. And then the rest of the flower, I've been taught to dry, and it makes like a mild tea, and it's supposed to be really good for you. So, yeah. Paper whites, time to plant paper whites, absolutely. So, and those have been preconditioned just like the amaryllis. So if you plant them, and you don't have to chill them, you just plant them up, put them in a sunny spot, and they start to grow, and enjoy them in the winter. Pretty quick. Yes?
Yes, about peonies that need to be divided, is it now or in spring?
I like spring. When you start to see the eyes come up. Yeah. You could do them in the fall too. But I like the spring. Yes.
We have a lot of solid seal.
Uh-huh.
Like catnip and everything, should that be cut back in the fall?
No, I would leave that. You mean to keep it at bay?
No, just like usually it could turn,
It turns ugly.
And then
It's so aggressive that if you did cut it back, I don't think you're gonna harm it. Because it's so aggressive. Some of those things that are super aggressive, you can cut back. Nepeta, you could cut it back. I've cut that back so many times, and it sprouts right up. And you'll get to know your perennials, like in how far you can go. But don't forget, in that mass planting of Solomon seal, you might have some kind of beneficial insect or something or other that likes that environment. So, yeah, just be wary of that, I would say. Yes?
We have 4 or 5 peony plants that used to bloom beautiful red blooms. And then the last 2-3 years, the foliage comes up, a little bud comes up, and then nothing.
And you see a bud.
You see a bud, we'll
Okay.
be like 1 or 2.
So what I would try, one, is the area wet?
Could be, it's right alongside a building, and
Uh-huh.
it's not very sunny either.
So I would, in the spring, dig them up, move them to a sunnier spot. And it also could be wet in that spot, which is why they're doing that. Because if they're developing the bud, I mean, actually, I should say, peonies can take some shade. And tree peonies especially take a decent amount of shade. But more so, it's probably wet there, and because the bud's developing, and then it's rotting, and because the peony is too wet. So I would move it. The other reason why a peony wouldn't bloom is if the eyes are buried. And so what the eyes are, go home, rake away, like, pull away the soil from where the crown of the plant is. And you'll see what's almost like rhizomes. It's like the root system in the plant. You get down to the root system of the plant, and you'll see these little nubs, like little cute pink nubs, and we call those the eyes. Those eyes really should be very close to the surface and not mulched over. I mean, if you do mulch, you want to make sure the mulch is raked away and come March. But those eyes really kind of want to be exposed. And if they're not, they won't bloom. If the peonies are buried too deep and the eyes are buried too deep, they won't bloom. And so you want to, if you have peonies that haven't been blooming, but they're in a good spot, they're a good sunny spot or a good well-draining spot, you want to dig them up in the spring and lift them so that those eyes are exposed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been putting my fireplace ashes over my peonies in the spring.
Uh-huh.
And I have a profuse.
It's that potassium.
So it's-
Yeah.
It's been working.
Yeah.
And maybe a little sweet pea.
Yeah. Good tip. I'm gonna try it actually. Thank you. I get lots from my wood stove. Ashes and some sweet peat. So the sweet peat is that mulch product that everybody loves. And what you're probably doing, because you're raising the pH on the peony with the potash, but you're lowering it with the sweet peat because it's pine mulch, and so that's going to lower the pH. So you're kind of counteracting things. And the other part of sweet pea is it's basically pine bark and manure that's like been composted. And so the manure too is probably like giving them the shot of nitrogen they need. Perfect. Nice tip. I'm gonna try it.
The fireplace.
Yeah, you gotta do something with them. We spread them over our like wild meadow area. I'm just gonna go out there and spread them around. Oh yeah, sure. Someone's waiting back here. I'll be right back to you. Go ahead.
My drainage feritilize, I didn't hear you very well. Stream them anytime between now and April? Or not?
You don't wanna, if you trimmed them by a third, because you really like, they look god awful, I can't take it anymore, I need to trim them. It won't hurt them. But you can't, by a third only, by like, a little bit, that's it. If you whack them down, you're gonna affect them. You're gonna get lots of soft growth that gets floppy, and they're just not gonna be very vigorous. And I often tell people the site evaluation's key, and then the plant selection after that, because paniculatas come in like every size and color now, right? I mean, you know, the panicle, the flowers generally the same, but you have so many different variations. Are they white? Are they lime green? Do they fade to pink really quick? Are they a pale pink? Are they a deep mauve? I mean, there's so many now, right? But especially the size is really incredible, the variation in size between the cultivars now. So you have Bobo, which if you're, okay, so let's say you're planting in front of your house. You're not gonna plant in front of your windows, or you might, but I mean, you're probably not gonna plant a limelight because a limelight gets 8 feet tall. But you're probably gonna plant a Bobo because a Bobo only gets 3 feet tall. And then, you know, if you planted a limelight, what's the point in having to whack it down to 4 feet when you can buy a Bobo and have it stay at 3 feet? So, you know, there's so much variation amongst the cultivars now that you can pick the right panicle hydrangea for the right spot now. So I always say, you know, rather than have to do all that maintenance of trying to keep it to the size, you need, like, try to pick the right plant that won't outgrow, that you're like having to like wrestle with it all the time.
And with the winter containers, do you water them?
Yes, I do. Especially if the winter's dry and we haven't had much precipitation, even in the form of snow, I do water them. And especially under a porch, because they're evergreens and they're gonna lose some moisture. So yeah, definitely once in a while you go out there and water them. Not all the time, like maybe twice a month. So yeah.
What do you think about the burlap bonnets on boxwood?
I hate it. I'm so glad you brought it up. And I don't hate it because of how it looks, although it looks horrible. But Peter's pretty convinced that the boxwood blight epidemic got exacerbated by wrapping. It's not natural. I can understand putting a barrier up if they're close to the road and you're worried about salt exposure, but the most I would do is stake it out and staple the burlap up like a barrier, like a fence, and not wrap them. You're really not doing them much good, except to hold in all that moisture and create an amazing environment for not only boxwood blight, but Phytophthora and even leaf miner. I mean, leaf miners just go nuts. So I think that stop wasting the money. I mean, burlap's expensive. I mean, those big rolls and the labor of it too. So I would say let them go. Let them get their air circulation. Deal with a little bit of winter injury. You know, they come out of winter injury pretty quick. So if they get, you know, walloped by, you know, the ice and the snow and just wind, little bit of pruning in the spring, fertilizing, and all of a sudden they wake up and they flush right out of it. So, yeah. Stop burlapping. Yes.
Oh, the butterfly bushes, I may have missed this. Do you prune them now or in the spring?
Okay. Good question. I get this a lot. Don't touch them. Yeah.
Okay, pretty quick.
Don't touch them. I very lightly prune the butterfly bush, never to the ground. They store a lot of, there were studies on, they store a lot of sugars in their stems over the winter, and they're still sending those sugars down into the ground. I think that's what helps them get through a tough winter. They are not terribly good at withstanding walloping wind and like cold wind and exposed areas. They're a tough plant. It's very bizarre, but they really, they don't like exposed areas in the winter. So it's got to be a little protected. Leave those stems. They have tons of sugars in them to help them get through the winter, and then you give them just a little haircut. You'll see those stems, as dead as they look, they will start to sprout again. So yeah, it doesn't hurt to mulch them either. And I'm not huge on putting lots of mulch on the beds, now, but I would mulch them. Yeah, if you've been having trouble with them. And we had a lot of trouble with them last year. I know a lot of people came in the spring and they're like, oh, my butterfly bushes. I think it was partly the drought that led into the winter, and it wasn't a terribly bad winter, but it was the prior drought. Yeah, which is kind of odd because that plant, like, you go to Europe and it's growing in between the train tracks. I mean, it's kind of weird, but yes.
I've heard that maple leaves are acidic, and they can damage the lawn if you don't.
You have maple leaves.
I've heard they're acidic, and if you don't remove them in the fall, they can damage the lawn. Is that correct?
Maple leaves?
Yeah. No?
No, I mean, so if you have a lot of leaf litter on the lawn, it can kind of harbor some lawn diseases, I'm sure, because there's a lot of moisture and shading that happens. You want to maybe run a mower over those leaves, and then it gets mulched down a little more, and then it's like feeding the soil. So it's really fantastic for the grass.
So they're not acidic.
I mean, leaf mulch does tend to be acidic, and I see your point on that. But if you're liming every spring, like you should, you probably counteract it. So, and it's not terribly acidic, leaf mulch. So yeah.
My lawn is completely organic. I don't do
Anything to it. And it's green and beautiful, I bet. Yeah. We start to throw, it goes down to the soil again, right? So when you start to tinker and use different chemicals, it throws the soil biome out of whack. And then, it takes a long time to recover. It's like grass are easy junkies. The grass will respond and then want more fertilizer and more chemicals. If you get away from all of that, it takes time, but
Okay, I think it's time for the raffle.
yes, I think so. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
I know.
All right. All right, I think we're gonna do the best for last, which is the basket, the bowl basket.
Aww.
All right, we'll do it.
Did anyone not? Everybody get a ticket?
This is the first prize is pumpkin ribbon. Look how cute this is. And then we have NCBL greeting cards too.
I love using pretty trivets underneath house plants. Here we go. Ready? The number, right?
Yeah.
427511.
What is it? Oh, James!
All right.
Okay. No, that's always great. Okay, what do we have next? Oh yeah, we have a holiday board and a candle. Seasonal candle. Yes, pretty.
All right, ready?
Yes.
shop right? Thank you. That was so amazing. Okay.